Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Fernando Dominguez Pinuaga, Vice President from SandboxAQ, and we are here today with Carlos Abellan, founder and CEO of Quside. And we've talked in the past about quantum networks. We also had another session with quantum key distribution. And today we're going to learn with Carlos about QRNG and whatever else is Quside doing, because I see you guys are expanding solutions and different products. So, Carlos, welcome.
Thank you, Fernando. Great to be here today.
And before we start, I think the audience would love to know much more about yourself. Where are you from? How do you end up in the quantum physics world? And I know the story of Quside, of course, but if you can share with all, what is ICFO and how did everything start?
Sure. So I'm a telecom engineer by training. I'm based in Barcelona. And basically at that point when I was trying to move away from university into something else, I was picked very much the interest on cryptography on the one side, on my engineering background, but then on quantum physics, right? And then I discovered this topic called quantum cryptography and said that seems something for me. And then I discovered ICFO. ICFO is one of the world-leading research centers around photonics technology with a lot of focus on quantum. And then I joined to work on this technology of quantum random number generation.
So you joined ICFO as a researcher, and what was the spark inside of you that said, I have to leave the research and start a company for this?
Sure. So since inception, right, since I joined the institute, the project always had some sort of label that had some potential knowledge transfer or technology transfer into industry, right? That was a big part of the institute for this program, right? It may have potential industrial impact. The second half of the story was that myself, as well as other of my co-founders, we really wanted to do it ourselves, right? We had also some experiences from the past on entrepreneurship, so I love building things and building things for others. So the two things aggregated at the same time, the institute pushing for technology transfer, us wanting to take the industrial path, and basically we spun out the company in 2017.
So in our YouTube channel, we have a lot of videos on PQC, post-quantum cryptography. We have a few videos where we explain quantum key distribution and quantum networks, but I don't think we've gone very deep into QRNG. Can you explain us how this is different from the others, and what is the main part of the technology for it?
So quantum random number generators, or QRNGs in short, is a piece of hardware that generates random numbers, and to do that, it does it by measuring some quantum effects. It's really simple, right? You have a certain quantum system, you take measurements, you produce ones and zeros that are completely unpredictable. So that's a foundational technology for cryptography. Almost all of the cryptography primitives that you can think of, conventional cryptography, post-quantum cryptography, quantum key distribution, symmetric key exchange, all of them require randomness. So it's really a foundational component, and that's what a QRNG actually addresses. It produces the randomness that cryptographic protocols and algorithms use to protect information, right? So that's the sort of the pyramid, and that's why we say Quside sits at the foundation of digital trust, because without cryptography we can't protect information, and without randomness we can't execute cryptography.
So what makes randomness so important?
So actually, back in the day, and there is this famous Caesar cipher, right? So basically, they just had a fixed key. It was always 3, right? Someone picked that number and they used that number 3. What that means, you were replacing, for instance, an A, but the letter that came 3 positions after by a D, and you were doing that over and over again. What's the problem? That whenever picks a trick, then you can decrypt all of the messages, and that becomes completely useless. And then people got more sophisticated. It was not a fixed number. You picked the letter at random, so 3 or 5 or 26, right? So how did you do that? I don't know exactly, but probably just pick the number from your head. We'll use 17. But again, it was you just need to try 26 times, and then you'll know how to decode that message. Then people got more sophisticated and substitution ciphers and until we got to this point. But for a very long time, you had a very small need for randomness from the perspective that you only had to talk to a bunch of people and you were fixing numbers. But then the internet came and now we can talk to billions of people. So we need to mechanisms to exchange keys with whoever we want on the planet, and now not only with a person, between machines and machines, and from routing and from AI agents to AI agents and all of that stuff, right? So we need a lot more scalable ways to do that, and that's when physics came into the play. You have different methods. From people tried radioactive decay, shot noise, and ring oscillators is one of the most common technologies, and now we can do that in hardware. But for a very long time, people were doing it offline, by hand or with instrument, like flipping coins and generating the numbers. And there is this. I remember with one of my papers, when we published it, my supervisor gave me this book. It was 1,000,000 random digits. And it was a book this thick. Actually, you opened it and then you pick the number you wanted, right? And we actually at Quside, we built an analogy of that, which is this book, like 1,000,000 digits produced in 1 millisecond. And actually, it's a table of random digits. That's how people used to do this back in the day. The key aspect in cryptography, there is a part of cryptography that is about how you handle data, right? How you scramble it around. But there is always, because we need to talk to each other and we need to know the way we shuffle information, and the shuffle information, that's somehow known to everyone. Unless we add some sort of unpredictability into the mix, kind of a secret that I'm the only one to know, or in this case you and I, because we want to talk to each other, we can't actually protect information, right? That's where randomness comes into play. It's kind of a generation of a secret, in maybe more technical terms, entropy or cryptographic keys, that actually allows us to talk through public channels, right? So without that unpredictability, we can't actually implement cryptography.
Okay, I understand. So how does a company like Quside end up having different products? Like, I see you start with the cryptography, now you have also Monte Carlo methods, and you have heuristic optimization. Can you explain us a little bit those three different products that you offer?
So randomness is the ethos of Quside, right? We were born spanning out this technology to produce random numbers from quantum technologies, right? In lasers and photonics and all of that stuff. But the application of randomness is actually quite broad, right? We're talking a lot about cryptography, and I would say a big chunk of our focus is now here because there is a lot of traction and timings, and there is a lot of urgency to do things. But you also have it in a broad field called randomized computation, right? There are a bunch of problems that either are very hard to solve and we can't solve them computationally, or actually cannot be solved because we're trying, for instance, to predict the future, right? If we're trying to predict the stock market, how do we do that? We don't know what's going to happen. Then we have some models and we run scenarios, right? And these scenarios, you need to run them under random conditions, so you end up using randomness, right? So we use them for those two things. So problems that are very hot and we can't solve, and then we don't have an exact way to solve them. We find an approximate solution, which is good enough. We use that all the time in optimization, in pharma, in any place. And then the other one is trying to forecast the future, in which there is this Monte Carlo method, stochastic workloads, that sort of stuff. What is the challenge? The challenge is not only about the generation of the random numbers. You need good random numbers, it's true. But it's also that the generation and the processing of those random numbers, we found out, is eating a lot of compute time and CPU time. And you don't want to waste your main silicon actually running that task if you can offload it to something else that is a lot more efficient and better at solving that problem, right? And that's what we ended up discovering working with customers, that we can offload this part of their main compute, CPU, GPU, whatever it is. We do it outside, and then we accelerate the performance of the overall computation, right? It fits very well to all of these heterogeneous compute platforms in which you use a GPU for something, you use a CPU for something else, or a TPU for something else. You may use this product, this randomness processing unit, to accelerate this aspect of randomized computation.
Okay, I understand. And that's the hardware that you guys work on, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned customers. Who are the entities that are mostly require this kind of technology?
So we're currently operating in three main segments. The first one is space, second defense, third is data center, with a very strong focus, as I said, on cryptography, right? Who are the customers for a company like Quside? Is typically in the first two, space and defense, is the big contractors or system integrators, right? You can think of companies like Airbus, Thales, all of that sort, right? In data center, our key customer is the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, right? From firewalls, hardware security modules, routers, secure gateways, all of that stuff. That's where we fit. We go inside that box, right? You can think of the Intel Inside model. It's similar, right? We go inside the box, to make it more secure. But because the market is very nascent, right, and it's been nascent for a few years, we work both with infrastructure operators like telcos or data center operators like Equinix or Telefonica, but also with the chip makers, which is at the end the people we really integrate together at the lowest level. And then we have a broad go-to-market strategy there. But the key player is the OEM.
Okay. You mentioned the market in CCP. What needs to happen to the industry or the market to have like a GPT moment for you guys? Or everyone calling you 1,000 calls per day. We need that box. We need it for yesterday.
So there are two aspects of that. One is already happening, is the new standards for post-quantum transition. There are similar things happening in QKD, especially in Europe, right? But standards are already there. That's been a major step. Compliance is going to be the next step, right? So really, if you want to certify this product to ship into certain markets, you need to do A, B, and C.
Okay.
So we are already on the path. From a more randomness perspective, there's something that we are actually very invested in. This is something that we took out from research and we're pushing it industrially, which is what is the next generation of randomness technologies and why, right? And for us, something that is fundamental is randomness can only be generated in hardware. It's a hardware problem, and I have never heard that a system has been shipped to the workshop to fix the random number generator because it broke, right? And probably some of those broke, but no one is looking at them properly, right? So I think that layer of verification in the hardware is foundational, right? So what is the GPT moment is that becomes a de facto standard. People want not only to generate very good randomness, they want to make sure it's verified locally in your device. And that's where we have a unique solution that we're actually starting to embed in systems.
So will you have that embedded into every device, including cell phones and your watch, everywhere?
From satellites
every kind of
to
machine that wants to
yes.
communicate, and today is every machine.
Yes.
How is AI, what's happened in the last 2-3 years, then impacting you guys? New, not only LLMs, of course, but also AI agents, and also what we work at SandboxAQ, large quantitative models, which is using AI with more biology, chemistry, mathematics.
So, on the first response is AI is sucking the oxygen out of everything, right? So everything is about AI, and that has led some of our customers focus more on AI than in security, right? That's been a challenge on the last 2 years, but now everyone is speaking up again. And I'd say one of the most interesting things that is happening is that all of these AI workloads, agents, new protocols, automated stuff is opening new challenges in terms of security. So how are we going to be protecting those communications, those machine-to-machine communications? How are we going to be authenticating and authorizing all of that workflow? Is tremendously increasing the amount of keys you need to generate, distribute, and execute and control, right? That's actually a growing trend. We're working with partners and customers on how we can best serve and deliver technology that it's optimized to that. And that's something extremely exciting, right? So I'd say that's what's happening today. So new infrastructure is being rolled out. The need for security is increasing. And because of the timing, you need to comply with post-quantum cryptography. And you're deploying new infrastructure is like the perfect storm.
How do you differentiate, for those that are not that familiar with the quantum world, why is quantum randomness required versus classical randomness, and what makes Quside different from the other quantum randomness companies that exist out there?
Yeah, so if you compare, let's say, quantum random number generation with respect to state of the art, the main thing we have to add by exploiting quantum effects is, of course, the generation and all of those fundamental advantages of quantum and all of that. But from a practical standpoint, we can verify the quality properly locally to the device. That's not something that can be done, or it would be extremely complex to do with existing technologies, right? So that verification component, it's essential. It's a core differentiating element. When we compare against other quantum random number generation companies, Quside, we've been investing since day one on scalability. So today we can produce wafer scale our technology, so it's highly industrialized for data center applications. And we're also in the path of industrializing for volume applications beyond the data center into the edge, eventually even consumer devices. So we're ready for scale today, right? So we not only have the chips, we also have specific modules for different industries that we've developed for specific customers or verticals, right? So we are ready, and that's something very differentiated today. We can scale. The second aspect is performance, right? Our technology is inherently very fast. We can go from 50 megabit per second up to a gigabit per second. So once you need speed, we're kind of a very unique solution, right? And if you don't need speed, you actually get 50 megabit, which is enough for your... When you think about this post-quantum transition and doing it in a crypto-agile way, you want to make sure you design your hardware with a little bit of space, right? You don't want to be very tight on your needs because you may not be able to upgrade, right? So speed always helps. And again, depending on the industry, gigabits is now a good level that we're delivering, 1 gig, but we're being asked for a lot more, right? And that's something we're doing from an R&D perspective, driven by customer demand, specifically in the space industry.
So if I am the CEO of a big bank and my CTO or VP of engineering comes to me and say, hey, we need X millions of dollars to upgrade all our infrastructure to new quantum random generator numbers. And how do you convince the CEO of a bank saying, you really need to do this right now?
So one easy way to understand this is, look, how much are you going to be investing in upgrading and maintaining your cryptographic infrastructure, and how valuable is that is secure to your business, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you will have a number there, and it's going to be a very big investment. The point is, unless the randomness is well sourced and monitored, all of that investment may be vaporware, right? So, and one of the big risks with randomness is that many times you cannot even identify there is a problem, because testing randomness is very hot, and you may be testing it, or you may think you're testing it, but it may not be the case, right? So it's really a tiny fraction of an investment of what you need to do to deploy your entire infrastructure and cryptographic stack, that this is just peanuts.
Going back to the investors topic, if you had unlimited money, or let's put $1 billion or $100 billion to make it more exaggerated, how would you use it?
So I think the main priority, if you think more about the mission and the core mission of what we have, is actually to make sure that in next years, in the future, everyone will be generating randomness that is reliable and trustworthy, because you're verifying it, right? Everywhere, from your phone to a satellite, right? Mm-hmm. And I believe at that point, we will look back and say, how on earth we were not doing it before, right? It's like the seatbelt, right? So people were driving cars without seatbelts. We cannot imagine that, right? So I think that's going to be the same. So driving adoption, so that we can make it sure at the scale and the cost that is required to put it in every system. That is the drive of the investment, because once it's there, it's the right thing to do from a security standpoint, it's the right thing to do from an operating standpoint, right? And then we will already be inside.
Okay, then what is the biggest challenge you guys are working to solve?
Scalability is a very important one, right? So how do we make sure we can, again, we're deploying and integrated in satellites, defense systems, and data centers, right? There is an investment still to get there. Really scaling the cost down, driving it to consumer levels is a challenge at the semiconductor scale. We're combining photonics and electronics. There is a lot of sexy and fancy technology that needs to be developed. So that's one of the main challenges. How do we scale gracefully and in a convenient way, and that we can meet the timelines of deployment from customers?
If you go through a new round, what kind of investors will add more value to your cap table?
So we're looking for people that help us accelerate, right? We were talking about what's the main challenge is how do we make sure we can scale it, make it at the right target cost, and drive adoption, right? Whoever can help us on those topics, it's what we want to have on board, right? Because I think we're ready. We have the right technology, the right protection. We've proven we can scale. We have an amazing team, probably the largest in the world, fully focused on this topic. So we have all the right ingredients. So if you help us accelerate, that's what we want to have.
And last thing is, we like to give the micro open to you, and if there's any message or anything you would like to share about a Quside or yourself or your vision for the future, so it's open for you.
Okay, thanks, Fernando. So I'd say, just to highlight some of the points, right? So we are at a time in which, it's not that we need to sell a lot on that, but we rely on information for almost everything we do on almost any industry we can think of. So there is a lot of value that we're supporting there. Cryptography is essential, and we are the way we're protecting information today is not the way that we'll be protecting information in the 2030s, right? There is a massive transition. There is a massive amount of talent and capital that needs to go into doing that the right way. And one of those elements is at the foundation of all of that, which is the entropy generation process. Has been largely overlooked for many years, and I think it's the right time to build the strongest foundation. We need some of those things. We need talent, we need resources, we need investment, we need access and capacity. So anyone that believes that can help us, we're more than happy to talk and initiate a conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carlos. This was very delightful. It was. I learned a little bit of the things that I thought I knew, but I didn't know.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Fernando, and a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting us.